Kim, it's on you.
Thank you, Vakia. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kimberly Amazu. I am a mental health counselor, also certified in disaster mental health counseling, and owner of Amazu Mindful Mental Health. I don't know what else you want me to say about myself, but that's it in a nutshell. Mental health counselor. I specialize in racial trauma and race-based stress. And yeah, I'm very passionate about mental health, specifically mental health of Black and Brown folks. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kim.
Hi, my turn. My name is Lisa Andujar. I'm a registered nurse, labor and delivery. I have a new position of the last year, a nurse clinical manager at New York Presbyterian. I've been a nurse for 35, going on 36 years. I can't believe it. And I'm still loving it. It's a little challenging lately after COVID. I have 2 girls, a hubby, 30 years. I have 2 adult girls. My little one's a nurse and my older one's a graphic designer. And they're my life. And thank you very much for having me here. Appreciate it.
Lisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tangela Reed. I'm an HR business partner within financial services, and I own a company called Talent Ready, where I prepare Black and Brown talent for jobs that will help them to change their lives. I am excited to be here. I've known Rakia since we were in high school. So our recent interactions have, helped me to get into positions to speak to audiences like this, which is prime space for all of us to connect and share our ideas for elevation of each other. So really appreciate the invitation and happy to be here.
You're most welcome. And MJ.
Hello, everybody. So happy to be here as well. My name is Marshila Hayes, but you can call me MJ. Don't confuse me with MJs, any of the MJs who have like major money, like Michael Jackson or Joy. But I'm a senior vice president of HR and the head of culture and belonging at I'm not a New York native. I have been here for 7 years, but I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm the proud fur mommy of a little cavapoo named Cassius, who is laying right next to me on the floor. And I think that this is an incredibly important and nuanced topic that we're going to be discussing today. And I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists, but also getting some insights from our attendees here, just about your experiences with imposter syndrome and how we can all come together to support each other a little bit more and a little bit better.
Thank you, MJ. Good morning again, everybody. My name is Verkia of VSpeaks, and I'm sure you hear that often if you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And I'm so happy that you all are here today to join us for in-depth discussion on imposter syndrome, women in the workplace. So thank you again to our panelists for introducing yourselves. I'm so happy that everybody is here joining us this morning, and we're going to begin our discussion. I'm going to start us off by putting a question out there, and any of our panelists can jump in and answer. And if you ladies can, definitely be active in the chat. I find that even though you're a participant, the way we participate is through interaction. So definitely utilize our chat. So ladies, what policies, practices, or workplace cultures contribute to this phenomenon called imposter syndrome? Come on, ladies, jump on in.
So I can start. Working in human resources, we tend to focus on policy. Practice, I think, is a different story. And when I think about imposter syndrome, and hopefully everyone understands what imposter syndrome is. So by definition, it's this fear that despite your accomplishments, achievements, potential success, you feel like a fraud, like you are not supposed to be in the spaces that you occupy. And when I reflected on this question, I just thought about how our society works. So again, being in human resources, things like inclusion, belonging have always been a part of the policy, right? Like you can't discriminate against people. You can't choose people or decide not to choose people based on certain attributes. But when you look at the makeup, especially in financial services, what my experience has been is I'm typically one of very few or the only Black person, potentially the only Black woman in the room. And when I think about practices that go against policies, but it's unsaid, it contributes a lot to imposter syndrome because at the end of the day, we're all looking and modeling what we actually see happening. So if I take it to a very basic thing around, let's say, recruitment, we are intended to recruit and hire really anyone who's qualified. But what usually happens is we hire a lot of people who are known by their own network. We take employee referrals, and that contributes to hiring very similar people. And I don't speak from only my current firm. This is, every firm that I've worked for. We tend to hire the same types of people. And I think that contributes a lot to imposter syndrome because if you walk into a room, you don't see yourself represented. Obviously, you feel like, wait a second, like, am I supposed to be here? It's almost like an innate feeling. As soon as you walk in the door, you kind of feel like you don't belong.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking about the first time I ever experienced that. And just a little known fact about me, my undergraduate experience was at a HBCU, and up until that point, all of my education was with people who looked like me. So it wasn't until I went to graduate school at NYU and I looked around and I was like, what is happening right now? And I think that was the first time I experienced that. Of course, there was no name for it at that point. It just was a feeling.
Right.
So yes, thank you for sharing that. Any of you other ladies want to tackle that? Kim?
Yeah, I just want to, I think when you ask the question, for me, the most basic and short answer is white supremacy. Every work model was rooted in white supremacy. And so when we, just to piggyback on some of the things that Tangela was saying, when you go into, an agency or corporation and there is lack of true diversity, right? And what I mean by that is you may have some Black and brown folks sprinkled in here and there, but like, are there any in leadership positions and true leadership positions with power? Because it's easy to have figureheads, right? Like there's easy to say, we have this person and they're on the central team, but do they have power to make decisions, right? That impact other people. So when you have lack of leadership, like no one looks like you in leadership positions, or they don't have any true power, when you're the only person there, it's inevitable that you feel like you being there is a fluke, right? Like if there's no one else that looks like you, if you're the first of anything, it's just like, well, should I really even be here? Like, is this space for me? And so you start to internalize that. So I think just everything about the white supremacist work model, even down to the idea or the definition of professionalism, was born out of white supremacy. Like professionalism was literally, that idea was put into place to whitewash, to make everybody conform to the idea of whiteness and what is worthy in the standard of whiteness. So the fact that, the fact that we needed things like the Crown Act, when we think about like, what does your hairstyle have to do with your ability to perform a task? All of those things is from white supremacy. So if everything that you know about professionalism in the world of work was created without the intention of you even being there, how could you not feel like you shouldn't be there?
Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to tackle that, or anybody have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I had an experience when I worked in the city for most of my career, and I live upstate, and I decided to get a per diem position upstate. It was closer, 30 minutes from my home. I was so excited, and I joined the team, and I was one of the only brown skinned ladies there. And I had been a nurse for over 20 years, and nothing was good enough. I just felt like, whatever I did, there was a problem. At the end of I thought I did a great job my whole shift. And in the morning, someone would just point out, "Oh, you didn't close this, or you didn't write this," and I started questioning myself. And I think back now, I had this conversation with my husband, because I did leave. I just went back to working where I was. And he said I should have stuck it out. He goes, "You should have stayed." So that's a question. Like right now, I wouldn't be driving, 2.5 hours into the city, even though I love where I work. I don't know if I gave up, or could I have changed anything? I have, one of our guests here worked there also. So she also knows what the culture was kind of like sometimes. So that's it. I don't know. It's a big doubt that I have in my mind. Why should I have stayed?
Mm.
And then I went back to where I was, and it's better.
And I think that that's something that we all, if you're one of the first, or if you're the first, you kind of carry a lot of weight with that feeling of, oh, I'm setting the bar, right, for the next group that comes behind. And what does that look like? And I really believe that this is where mentorship comes in. And you can have mentorship unofficially or officially. But I think it's important to have mentorship, because how do we learn? Tangela is all about that with her work, right? Like she's preparing young young people who are Black and brown to go into the world of work. And what does that look like in finding positions that really speak to who you are as a person? But we need to have more mentorship so that these things can happen. And that came to my mind for two reasons. One, because my mom is on, but I also know that one of the persons that she used to work with, there was an unofficial mentorship happening. And so, in that regard, we need those things, because that's how we get better, if there's somebody before us. So I wonder what that would have looked like, Lisa, for you, if there was somebody else to
Right.
support you through that, right? And I think that that's something that is key as we move forward. So I'm gonna shift gears a little bit, and I'm just wondering, does our family upbringing play a role in exhibiting imposter syndrome? What does that look like? We know that we take on the characteristics of our family, because those are our first teachers, the persons that we're raised by, or whom we live with. So I want to ask, like, does that have an impact on that feeling of imposter syndrome? Go for it, MJ.
Um, I definitely think our upbringing does impact how we see ourselves. And I went down the rabbit hole the other night of on TikTok, where it was a woman who was talking about a woman of color. She identified herself as a Black woman, but she was saying how many Black women have a fear of being perceived because of how we were kind of over indexed when it came to Black women stereotypes from when we were very young children to young adults, and then growing into our own womanhood and defining what is womanhood for us, what is femininity for us. And so it's like some folks have a tendency, because it's so much criticism that is coming at you from a stereotype, that you tend to shrink yourself a bit, and you have a bit of a fear of even being perceived or seen or observed in a way, because it feels more so like you're a sideshow. Like you can be the angry Black woman, like you're fitting into these stereotypes with people, so you don't even want people to see you in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you are, um, you know, advancing personally, professionally, on your own merits. It's different things that are coming to you that are not just by a fluke. It's truly by the sweat equity that you're putting into yourself, you know, from all different facets and all different areas. You can still feel as if like this isn't real for me, because you are still afraid to see yourself truly. And I know for me, like in the instances where I've had dealt with bouts of imposter syndrome, is to the point of what some of my fellow panelists mentioned earlier. Many times walking into spaces where you're the first, or you're the only, or you're the youngest, in instances that I've experienced as well, where it's like people are around you and they're very much established in not only their careers, but in their ideas and in, you know, institutionally, what this has already always been done, and this is what should continue in this way. And then you're put in a position to say, well, something needs to change, and that's why I'm here. And having to find that power within yourself, it's shifting the way you even perceive yourself, you know, to then position yourself for others to perceive you, and having to constantly battle with that internal man or woman for Women's History Month, that internal woman in your head that's saying like, well, we're not supposed to be here because no one else has been here, you know, or we're not supposed to do this because no one else is doing this. And having to like fight with that and come to a compromise in that space where it's like, yeah, no one else is here, but if I don't position myself to be here in this moment, then no one else will be here for the next person who comes and looks like me, to create an environment where they truly feel like they belong here, and that they're valued here, and that they're seen here, and it's okay to be perceived and seen.
I think it's important that we do those things because we have to be the example. Anybody else want to jump in on that? I think MJ brought up a lot of things, even about the generational factors that come into play. Tangela, Lisa, Kim, either of you guys want to share anything, or should we move forward?
No, for me,
I
I
can
think, you know,
sorry.
like trauma as a child, traumas that you have as a child, you know, for me, my father was a drug abuser. My mom took care of the family. You know, I saw her cry. I internalized it. I had to be strong all the time. So that made me just, everything I did had to be, I hyper produced, I hyper worked. Um, and then you get to, you're, oh, I was on welfare. So everything, I had to be better all the time, my whole life. I had to be good, 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 good. And then you go into a position like me, now I'm in a new position, and I'm like, I'm still not, I don't know if I'm worthy of it. You still feel like maybe I'm not worthy for this. And I am. I know I am, you know, but I talk to myself all the time. I am worthy. I am worthy. You know, so that I think that's, you know, the imposter syndrome is real.
Lisa, I just have a quick question. Is there somebody who is supporting you in this new role?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I think that's,
I am very lucky to say that my boss, she is very, very supportive, and she, you know, she compliments, she gives guidance. So I am very lucky. But it's in your mind. You know, I have to give my mind encouragement every day. I talk to myself all day long. I could do this. Oh, I made a mistake. Okay, it's okay. And you know, I may keep it for 24 hours in my brain, but then I tell my brain after 24 hours, no more, you know, you can't do this. But I don't know if that's good either, you know.
Interesting thoughts. Tangela, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So hearing Lisa talk, you know, it's igniting so many feelings for me, because I watch women, and I don't know you well, but I heard about what you've accomplished over your career. And not only do I coach and train younger children, but most of my clients are women who are very accomplished, but for whatever reason, feel like they have not made that mark yet. And I think it is, I mean, Kim jumped right into it. White supremacy culture impacts us day to day. So this question around our families, born in the 80s, grandparents born in the 60s or earlier, we're going through generations that have gone through such dramatic change when it comes to our society, which at the end of the day, when you walk into a workplace, even though people try to separate workplace from personal, we're all bringing in our personal experiences. And for me, from a family perspective, my mom, even though she encourages me, but just from the nature of her own upbringing and the way Black people are perceived in society, as well as women in society, she pretty much groomed me to stay in my lane. So even all of the components you talk about, drug abuse, the war on drugs was a war on us. It was a war on our families, right? Coming out of like the Jim Crow states and civil rights movement, we as Black people and women as well, because women were even treated more, I guess, as lower class citizens than Blacks were, based on when they were able to vote and participate in other things. But my mom pretty much groomed me to stay in my lane. So if I'm going for a promotion, she's kind of like, wait, really? You really want to do that? Like, don't rock the boat, right? Like, don't give them a reason to give you attention and then potentially pull the rug from under you. And I think that's all a trick of society, right? Like if we are aware of what our past, what our ancestors have gone through, if we are aware of what many people believe in their hearts, maybe not what they do in public, but what they believe in their hearts, we have to stand grounded in our ability, stand grounded in what we know to be right, which is you are an accomplished woman. You have earned your space. Your mom may have gone through things, your dad may have been a certain person, but your achievements have brought you to a place where you can operate in a solid way in your role, and you deserve to be there and you deserve to be paid for it. And anything that you do that is in line with that role, like you're not stealing, you're not, you know what I mean? Like people put us in a position to feel like we have to over police ourselves. And all of that is a result of white supremacy culture. And the awareness, these conversations are key to us acknowledging ourselves, expecting what we are worthy of, right? Expecting to be paid, expecting to be promoted, expecting to stay in roles where people may not like us. We might be getting under their skin because they hate the fact that we are able to excel. They hate the fact that you come from a father who was abusing drugs, yet you're still in the space with them, right? You hate the fact that I've come through all of these things, but I'm here. And for us, we have to just acknowledge the reason why we're here and just stand grounded in that.
So true. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Tangela, you said such a mouthful, and it's so funny. What came to mind as you were talking was a previous director of mine, and Kim can attest to this because she was there when it happened, who said to me, you are never going to be anything anything more than you already are right now. That's what he told me. And I never forget crying so hard, publicly disparaging me in front of my coworkers. And Kim will tell you, they were literally under the table pinching me like, Berkia, don't say anything. And it was so hard to hold myself together because the minute we got out of that space, I was a mess. And it was one of those feelings like, and that stuck with me for a long time. You are never going to be anything than you are right now. And I was just like, oh my gosh, but I had to figure out a way to let that go, because that's not where my story was going to end, and because I have friends like all of you and support like all of you, I was able to move forward, but that really took me down a whole lot of pegs. Even with all of the things that I accomplished. And, that wasn't the first time something of that nature happened to me, and it was, I think that was hurtful, but it was more hurtful when it came from people who I thought really cared about me. And I think that's where we as a people have to stop, pulling each other down, and being more supportive in that way. So I do feel like, yes, there are a lot of generational factors that come into play. Definitely the way our country was built, because it definitely is steeped in white supremacy and racism and the construct of racism, because that's not really a thing anywhere but here. But in you guys' opinion, like, why is it that minority groups, so research shows, let me rephrase, research shows that levels of imposter syndrome are very high in minority groups. In your opinion, what is that contributed to? Okay. It was like, let me know when it's right now.
No, because I'm going to speak from a historical context, but also from a psychological context. Newsflash, I'm a therapist, right? But this is very specific to communities of color for a reason. And I'm going to speak to Black people across the diaspora just because, that's my people. But I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the phrase post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
A famous researcher, Dr. Joy, and her last name escapes me, coined that phrase. And essentially, it's just meaning the multi-generational trauma and injustices that Black people have experienced since the time of enslavement. And I think we have to start there, because if you think about all of the just horrific things that were experienced during Black enslavement, the one thing that you did not want as a parent was for your child to stand out or get the slave owner's attention for being exceptional in anything, because you run the risk of that child being taken from you and or sold off.
Wow.
So the last thing you wanted to do was have an exceptional child, right? You want this child to do whatever Massa wanted them to do, but no more, right? You didn't want to draw any attention. You wanted to stay under the radar so that you could keep your child. So when, the slave owner would come around and see a child, I don't know, doing something that they felt like was exceptional, and they called attention to it, like, oh, this boy's strong. The first thing you're going to do as a parent say, oh no, he's lazy. He ain't strong, he's lazy. I gotta whip him to get him out. You want to downplay and you want to talk down on your child so that he doesn't draw any attention, right? That was something that we call a trauma response, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was something that you had to do for survival. This girl is dumb, she's lazy, oh, you say all those things in hopes of getting the attention off of your child so that you can keep your family intact. What happened, so that happened out of survival. The issue was that trauma response kept being repeated for the generations that we were enslaved, and then continued after. So now this trauma response has become a trauma pattern. So now, even though we're not enslaved, we're still conditioned to talk down on our prized possessions, right? Like, these are our children, we love them, but I don't want anybody else to be looking at them too hard. Like, I don't want them to shine or stand out. Let's keep our heads down. Let's just, keep it moving. So now these trauma patterns are passed down throughout the generations, even when, again, there's no need for them now, but now that it's so ingrained in the family that we just keep passing trauma pattern generation, from generation. And so now you look as, some of us have even had this experience as children, feeling like, man, nothing I do is ever good enough for my parents. Like, or you hear your parents, you may hear from other people that, oh, your dad or your mom is so proud of you. And then you wonder, well, why they never say that to me? Like, I've never heard them say that to me, right? Like, it's like you got to pull eye teeth to get a compliment out of your parent, or you go to college because your parents say you got to go to college. And then when you get the knowledge, like, you think you know everything. It's almost like, well, what, huh? Didn't you want me Do you want me to be intelligent? Right? It's those kinds of things that keep getting perpetuated. But it initially came out of a survival tactic, right? The problem is it didn't stop. And so when your first experience is with your parents telling you you're not that smart or you'll never be this, or and again, this isn't like something that they intentionally do because they don't love you. It's just it's what was done to them. So now they do it to you. And now you go into this workplace, or on the opposite end, let me back up on the opposite end. So my personal experience from my parents were not telling me I'm the best thing out there, right? I'm the smartest thing. Like they instilled a lot of confidence in me, but also I got the mixed messages of, yes, you're smart, but you got to work twice as hard. And in their mind, they thought that they were setting me up to succeed. But what that really tells, someone is I'm never going to be good enough. I always have to, martyr myself at this job to get recognition. And telling your kids you got to be twice as good to get half as much without telling them also the historical context of that really sets us up to believe that if I just work hard enough, I'll be accepted. If I just work hard enough, I'll get what's due me. And the fact is, you won't, because the system was designed for you never to succeed as much as your white counterparts. Even if there's, outliers here and there, the whole system is what you're up against, not just your particular job. Like this whole white supremacist model is a model. So I think this is why it impacts people of color so much, is because, again, the whole idea of work is a white supremacist model. And no one was designed to profit from this model but white folks. So anytime you have to operate into this system, it's you're already at a disadvantage. And I'm not saying that you can't succeed, but what I'm saying is it wasn't designed for you to succeed. So there's always going to be this idea that I'm not good enough or I don't belong, because the truth is we don't. Like it wasn't designed for us to belong. Now we have created our own spaces, and we've kind of bust down and sat at the table on our own, but it wasn't designed for us to succeed. And I think someone else mentioned it, and that's why anything that you do outside of this white supremacist model, like anything that we bring that's authentically us, is always going to be seen as unprofessional, right? The bar is always going to be moved. Like it doesn't matter how much you code switch. It doesn't matter how much you shrink yourself. You're always going to be the outsider because the system was never meant for us. And I think a lot of my work and all of my clients are Black and brown purposely. I purposely seek out, I purposely center Black and brown folks. So all of my clients are Black and brown. 85% of them are women. And I have not had one client that is participating in work that has not had workplace trauma, that has not had race-based workplace trauma. So this is not some, one-off things that, we experience, or we're personalizing things. This is happening. It is because the system is designed that way. And I think a lot of my work with my clients is just teaching them ways that they can cope and that they can prioritize their mental health and well-being. Because if you're participating in the system, you're gonna be faced with white supremacy.
Thank you so much for that, Kim. You said a mouthful. If anybody would like to respond to that or add to that, please feel free to do so. And also, ladies, and if you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the chat. I'm just curious, how many of us who are of African American or Latina descent, how many of us went to PWIs, predominantly white institutions? Please just throw that in the chat. I think there's a significant difference. And if any of our panelists went to PWIs, can you speak to that experience? I did talk about my personal experience a little bit earlier. what about like, and if you did go to a HBCU, what was that experience like? For undergrad or grad, if you went to a PWI for undergrad or grad, or HBCU in undergrad or grad, like, can you speak to what those experiences look like? Like I said, I went to a HBCU for undergrad, and then I went to grad school at a PWI, and that was quite a switch. MJ, definitely share what that switch was like, and if you had any experiences around imposter syndrome, switching from one environment to the next.
My experience, because I went to Tennessee State University for undergrad, and by the time I went to graduate school, I was probably maybe about at least maybe like 12 or so years into my professional journey. So I gotten like my first job out of undergrad and then transitioned into like, okay, this is career wise where I want to build my career. And then that's where I pursued my graduate degree. So my experience was a bit different where it didn't feel like a complete culture shock because I didn't do it back to back. And also because I had been in professional environments and like corporate America environments, and having to navigate those spaces is like a first or only or the youngest, where it was important to me in pursuing my graduate studies that I looked at a program that had folks in leadership, that had folks in different cohorts who actually looked like me. So that I could feel as if not only I'm getting the core curriculum of the graduate program satisfied, but I'm actually able to talk with, converse with, um, exchange, like do knowledge shares with people um, who looked like me, who had had different experiences, and were actively working in the space that I was working in, um, that we could like bounce ideas and experiences off of. So that it really did help, and I was intentional about it though. I wanted to be in a space where I could feel like amongst my peers and amongst the leaders and the educators in that program, even though it was within a PWI, it was at Georgetown, um, that I had folks that I felt comfortable enough going to as a sounding board to help me understand what I was dealing with or what I was experiencing or why I was feeling a different way, especially as I was pursuing my graduate degree for the purpose of wanting to build my career and continue to grow and, ask for different promotions or different opportunities and things like that that I hadn't done before. Um, but it was still a very real and present um experience and fear that I was like, I don't belong here. Um, but I'm thankful that I had support in that way to reinforce that, like, you're only in spaces by your own merit. Nothing is given to anybody. You are earning your space here. And as far as what you want to do within that space, yes, it will be um, a matter, you'll experience a lot of different resistance within transition. Um, but you have people who've experienced this before and they've been able to move forward and go forward and grow and continue growing in whatever capacity they were working in, whether it was working in a corporate environment or working as a consultant or things like that. And so I'm very, very thankful that I have a network of people that I still pull from who can help hold a mirror up to me when I am in those spaces mentally where I feel like I'm still struggling with perception and just trying to navigate through um, owning the space that I sit in.
Wow. I just want to acknowledge two things that were said, Lisa and MJ, mentorship and having that network of people that you can go to have those conversations with. I always tell people I don't go to work to make friends. That's not my thing. But I always leave with at least one friend. And it's for a reason, because people come into your life and it's for a reason. And I think that that is key, to have that network of folks that you can go to have those conversations. I'm just wondering, Lisa, Tangela, what were your experiences like educationally, and how did that impact what your work life looked like? Especially because, Tangela, you're in HR, so I know that that's a different animal or in and of itself.
Yeah, so I went to a PWI for undergrad, straight from Frederick Douglass Academy, which was about 98% Black. So for me, calling this imposter syndrome is something that now I can attach the name to what I was experiencing. So I recall staying very close to the few Black people that were a part of the campus life. I recall being in classrooms and people looking for to hear my opinion more, but me feeling like, okay, this is their conversation. They are participating in class, and I'm really just here to make sure I do, I get my degree. But I didn't participate in my education. So, like, if I could do that all over again, three kids before the three kids, I absolutely would, because I really feel like, I robbed myself of a true experience. I robbed everyone who was there with me of an opportunity to hear my perspectives. I didn't really ask questions. I kind of like hid in plain sight, if that makes sense. Like, I walked in, didn't really ask much. I may have been on project groups, and in those moments, you can't really hide from that, right? So you do participate because it's close quarters. Um, but yeah, I really felt like this is for them, and I just got to be here for whatever reason. And it's not until very recently that I've been able to identify that. Going through, so coming out of school and then going into corporate America, I started working in human resources at a consulting firm that worked with capital markets. So very high net worth individuals. And I was completely out of my league. And, being from where I was from, Janiqua, who is on the line, she recommended me to this firm. So there was a bit of comfort there because she had already been working there for a little while. So that's where I found like my moment to relax and really settle in. But I would say it's not until COVID happened and people have started to talk more about everything that we're talking about. It's kind of like I have participated in my own oppression. I've participated in my own experience of being an imposter, simply because I was, like Kim said, like we live in a society that is run by a system. People used to call it the man, and now I realize this is a true system that exists, and we all participated in it from different sides. And going to a PWI, I was a total imposter. I missed my education opportunity. In many of my opportunities at work, I've missed opportunities because I simply didn't participate. And now that I understand what we're all facing, I have to be a part of the answer to this, right? And that means showing up. That means speaking up. That means a lot of people say be your authentic self, right? Like, yeah, we have to be our authentic self, but it is my authentic work self. Like, I don't bring my whole Tangela from 142nd to, my workplace. But yeah, that whole experience and just the enlightenment that has come after COVID has had a true impact on me.
Thank you so much for that. That was rich in a lot of different ways. And Kim put in the chat internalized white supremacy, which I think we've all experienced here and there and everywhere. Lisa, I wanted to hear a little bit from you about your educational experience. And then I'm going to ask Kim to jump in.
Okay. I went to PWI and it was a nursing school. And during that time I was working, like 35 hours a week plus going to school. I was like 20, 21, 22. And one of my instructors was like, I got to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. He knew that I was working. Everybody else didn't work. It was just me, brown girl working. And he said, I think you should drop out. And I was like, why? He was like, well, you're passing, but barely passing. And I was like, but and that like struck me. I was like, I went home, I was crying, and there was no option to fail. I had to pass. I had to. I had money invested. I had to leave my home. There was I had to work. And the next day I came, back then there was no Google. I came to school, to clinical with like seriously 5 books, like books. Like I was walking through the parking lot, I hid them in a corner, and I did that, and I passed, and was it a good thing? Yeah, he made me excel, maybe he made me pass, I don't know, but nobody needs those challenges in their life because it was so stressful. And that I look back, I didn't need that. I was passing. I don't know why he chose me to say that to, or to, I don't know. And I think back, and it was a sad time in my life, but I encourage so many women to do, to go into nursing. I think, and when I do, I think of him all the time. I'm like, okay, you have another brown girl in nursing, and I'm proud of that. And some of the young women are managers now. They're injectors now. They own business. One girl owns a business. She's doing IVs. So I'm proud of that. And I think that that's what we have to do. We have to, embolden each other and encourage each other all the time. It's never going to end. It really isn't. I mean, I hope it does, but it's not.
So Carlene, thank you for that, Lisa. I hear all of those things. Nursing is you guys' field, but it happens in all of them, right? Like that's a thing in all of them. Carlene asked a question in the chat: is anyone of Caribbean background, and do you feel like that has made a difference on your thoughts on this topic? And I don't know if any of our panelists are. If you are, totally speak up. But if not, we do have somebody who is in our midst, Sheila, who definitely, you're welcome to come off mute and speak to that.
Hi, everyone. So yes, my family's from Haiti. I was born here. I am a nurse, and I have worked very, very many years with Veronica and Lisa, who are both my mentors, by the way. Yeah, so in the Haitian heritage, I don't know if there's anybody in who's of Haiti. Carlene. So I was raised, because I don't know what her age group is, but I was born in 68. So I was told, when you go to school, you don't ask questions, just learn, get good grades, and that's it. You don't speak to the teacher, you don't ask questions, so that is, and I attribute it to probably the same thing as what Kimberly was saying about the trauma from not to shine, so that you're not exceptional, you're not out in their radar of so that they see something in you, and then they try to take like the slave, in the slave time, where they would just take you and sell you off or whatever. So so I grew up kind of and very shy as well, and not asking questions. That's how I grew up. And then I went to a predominantly white college as well. I went to Buffalo, which is in New York State, but it's just like almost like being in the deep South. So I had a white roommate who had no idea anything Black. She was nice in her own way until she started, those little microaggressions would come through, and she would say like crazy things like, oh yeah, I think all Black babies are cute, or I think that, oh, there was 2 Black families in my town and, they stay in their place or they stay in their lane. Like, so those little things. But one experience, and this was when I was in nursing school, I noticed that when I was in clinicals, I know I'm going all over the place, so I'm sorry, but I'm just kind of like answering questions from everything that little bits and pieces of what everybody was saying. I was in clinical and I was, I want to say maybe one of 3 Black women in clinicals. And my professor for the last year was a Black woman, very strong woman who just got her PhD. I can't remember her name, but she would ride me really hard in pre-conference and post-conference. And I was like, I didn't understand. Like, why isn't she asking the white students all these questions? Like, I had to know my stuff. I would have to go into, she would give me a paper, a little prescription with like a paper with my patient's name. I'd have to go the night before, go through the chart, get all the information, come back home, write a full care plan, present my care plan, and then actually implement my care plan, and then finish my care. Like, it was very, very intense. So I didn't know why. And, because of my Haitian background, I just took it because you never challenge your teachers. You never speak back. You never ask questions. But then she pulled me into her office one day and she said, Sheila, do you know why I'm so hard on you? And I was like, oh my God. I said, no, I really don't. She goes, it's because you're a Black woman and I have to ride you hard because you have to be twice as good as your counterparts in order to be seen as equal. I said, thank you. I didn't know what to say. It was really hard to hear. And so, I mean, I did well. I finished school, I passed, whatever, but that always resonated with me. And I became an instructor. Thank you to Veronica, because she gave me my first job. And I vowed to always treat my students differently than that. Like, I don't want to say that she did wrong by me because in her heart, she was really trying to help me. But I decided to change the
Style.
And I wanted to support all my students regardless of color, but I do kind of like with my Black and brown students, I kind of try to give them a little bit extra support to see them through their career, to help them through, because I worked for schools where they told me, oh, just get rid of this one, get rid of that one. And they always tended to be students of color. And those are the ones that I would take and stay an hour after clinical and like really condition them and really mentor them into their career. So got the original question. I know I went all over the place, but did I answer your question?
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Sheila. So there's another question in the chat. And I know we've gone over a little bit with time, and I want to be conscious of that because, again, I understand people have, other things happening in their lives, especially on a Saturday. What advice do you have for us to continue to show support for women? Or any of our panelists can answer that.
I just really quickly echoing Sheila's sentiments. We've all experienced things where the intention was to help and empower and prepare us, but the impact of it was traumatic. Where, like this person is telling you, you'll never be anything more than what you are now. That's a traumatic way of, that's a inappropriate way of approaching someone, and you're instilling trauma where your intention is to kind of push them. It's like, okay, yeah, you push them off a ledge, and or could potentially, because you never know where anyone is in their emotional and mental state in any given time. Everybody can look completely fine, but you could be crumbling inside. And I think that's something from many of us having experienced things like this. I think the thing that we can do to support each other better is not take those experiences and be determined to repeat them. Take them and learn from them and adjust your approach and how you're engaging with people who are looking like you, who are coming into these spaces that you have been in, that you're navigating in, and that you understand the dynamics and the nuance of, and approaching them in a way of giving them that context and not just trying to override them to the point where they're exhausted.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
want to add to that as well. I think it's super important to realize that some of us are already supporting each other. And I think sometimes we think support is like we think we have to be doing something, but I think sometimes just having um those work friends, right? Those people that that will hold space for you. Like Berkia mentioned before, we used to work together and it was awful. But we had each other and I knew that I could go to her and I could speak about, the racial trauma that I was experiencing. And I knew that she wouldn't discount that because I also knew that she understood. Um, there was a person who was on early who had to go. Ayana, I used to work with her. She was actually one of my supervisors, and she actually encouraged me to apply. And she's the reason why I got promoted to supervisor. She encouraged me to apply for supervisor at my current position outside of my private practice. But like just knowing you have people that you can go to and that you can vent and they can hold space for you, I think it's so important. And it's usually it's almost it's kind of trauma bonding in a way because when I think about my friends that I've had at these horrible jobs and we're still friends out even after those jobs is because we really bonded over the workplace trauma, right? And so I think just showing up for each other and also too what I was very cognizant of when I was in a leadership position was I was very cognizant of the fact that I do have some internalized white supremacy. I mean, we all do. If you work on underneath it and we live underneath it, you're going to internalize some of it. So I tried to be very cognizant of what I did internalize so that I didn't perpetuate that unto the people that I that I lead. So things, I had to really unlearn a lot of things around what's professionalism. Like I had to unlearn some things that I knew did not fit people culturally, right? I had to like really unlearn a lot of things so that I wanted to be the type of leader that I rarely got myself. And I think just having self-awareness, being aware that you have internalized some things, being aware that you may have to unlearn some things, so that if you're ever in a position to lead, you don't perpetuate that and cause more harm or more trauma to other folks. So I think just being supportive to other people by holding space by other women and also being cognizant of what you've internalized so that you don't put that off on someone else I think is really important.
Absolutely.
I think we could also speak up a little bit more, especially working in HR. I noticed that people think if I say something, I'm sacrificing my job. If I say something, then I'll face retaliation. And I think that's true. You might, but think about what that means for generations to come. Because as we connect with others who may be going through the same trauma, what you should hopefully notice is that there's more people going through that than you might even think. And if you all stood up in a way that was structured, organized, you could make some changes that could be impactful. So I really love what you said, Kim, about operating in a different way and unlearning some of the things around professionalism because one of the reasons why Sheila and Lisa went through their experiences is because we do kind of have to work 2 times harder because those stereotypes that we're faced with blind people to our talents and blind people around our qualifications. So they, even my young daughters, my son, much more harshly punished in school, right? Even if it's small, it's because their teachers don't see them as like humans. They don't see them as equal. And that's just the harsh reality of like the society we live in. Like people literally look at us, make instant judgments, and say, wait a minute, you're here for this interview. Let me ask you all the hard questions, right? But then when their counterparts or our counterparts come in, they don't grill them as much because they have this instant human connection with them. So they don't go as far with the detail. So the policies, and going back to the very first question you asked us, the policies and the practice all come down to how we operate in our society. Right? If you're not following the practices, right? If you're not judging me the same way, I need to speak up about that. I need to bring that to someone's attention. It might be at the cost of discomfort. So that's the other thing. We have to put our lives on the line a little bit so that these things can change, because the private conversations are not always, they likely will not lead to much change.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I am going to ask Lisa and MJ to give us their closing remarks around this last question so we can end. So go for it, ladies, and I'm listening.
Words matter. You know, when we are in the workplace, we have to remember what we say matters. That's how we can encourage young women to be better, to believe in themselves. Another thing is we have to realize the person sitting next to you is not always qualified. And why do they think they're qualified? Is their mindset. You know, they don't have the same traumas that you've had or the same experiences. So we need to really figure out how to change our mindset and how to think differently about ourselves. It's not an easy thing, and I'm trying really hard, but I think that's only we could do it. You know, with the imposter syndrome, is only we could change our minds, because we're qualified, we're amazing, but we have to remember that and remind ourselves every day.
Thank you so much for that, Lisa. MJ?
I agree with those sentiments wholeheartedly, and just being able to give ourselves some grace, because we are amazing, and we have experienced a number of different things that have shaped how we see the world and the system that we are living in and navigating through. It can be very discouraging, but having grace for ourselves, having grace for others, so that we can step out of ourselves and actually build relationships that will truly empower and reinforce that strength, is important too. So
Thank you
that's
so much, MJ. I am so thankful for everybody who has joined us today. I thank you to our panelists for your insightful responses to all of the questions. This conversation was so enriching, and it just really reminded me that we have to continue to do the mentorship and, you know, network and remember all of the people that we encounter, because there's always somebody to talk to about various different topics in different fields. And so thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Round of applause for all of you. I was thinking at Carlene, like I'm thinking that maybe next year we can do an in-person event, and maybe break off into some small groups around this conversation. I think that would be so wonderful, and definitely get our young adult women to come into the conversation, because I think that's super, super important for them as well. Especially those college girls, because they're going to be going into the world of work soon, and they need to know what things they may have already experienced, but give the language to it. So again, thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy some sunshine and some outside time. And I'm going to stop recording.